Welcome to Das Won't Hunt. I'm Xiao Pierre Ruth for Information Week. And in this episode, we're going to be looking at one of my somewhat favorite personal thoughts on the idea of talking about predictions in enterprise IT and tech. Beginning of each year, at the end of each year, beginning of a new year, we often see, a roster of thoughts and ideas that are brought to the fore, with folks talking about what could be the next thing that could be swing, what's happening in various markets. But rather than just kind of speaking to here are the things that are going to come in 2025, I want to, brought together a good roster of folks to speak about what were some of the things that, that really mattered, what enterprise IT predictions actually mattered in 2024, because usually what happens is we bring up an idea of like what could be predictions, and then we might not pay attention to it. So in this episode, we have Rocky Cole, who's co-founder and COO of iVerify, Bogdan Raduta, head of AI for FlowX.AI, Bryan Wood, machine learning solutions engineer at Snorkel AI, Dave Merkel, Expel's CEO and co-founder, Alvaro Oliveira, Chief Talent Officer for Andela, and John Peluso, Chief Technology Officer at AvePoint. All of you, thank you so much for making yourselves available for the show today.
Well, thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
Okay. All right. So once again, we, beginning and ends of each year, we talk about predictions, what could be the things that might be really significant for the tech scene, how they can affect the enterprise tech market. But let's break some of these thoughts down. Bogdan, let's talk about any surprises, whether they were positive, negative, or just general surprises in tech that emerged during the year. Were there surprises that kind of like eclipsed what might have been some of the early predictions of what people thought were going to happen in 2024?
Hi, for sure. Let's just say on the positive surprises, we have the rise of generative AI, but behind the hype into generating images and videos, we have now real-world use cases such as AI agents for automating workflows in enterprise. AI didn't just improve efficiency, but also reshape the expectation around human-machine collaboration, for example, right? So we also developed a multi-agent approach, and we achieved to have a very positive feedback. What I saw also on the, let's just say, as a negative surprise is that currently, for example, enterprises are underestimate the complexity of integrating such as AI agent, and some organizations also faced unexpected difficulties integrating those kind of agents. So it's highlights the need for building robust platform, also including the AI, and bridge the old and new technologies like generative AI. So I see that in maybe next year we'll see that they will concentrate more on the part of the AI governance frameworks, and also going from, let's just say, human in the loop AI agents more on the autonomous agents, and how the relation between the human machine will work. So something like that.
Gotcha. Interesting insights. Appreciate that. Alvaro, how did things shape up with the tech talent, the skills, and the workforce predictions? That they're kind of, how did those predictions play out in 2024? There definitely we're definitely AI, of course, being the thing that a lot of people say, hey, we need more talent for this. What were we able to find the folks? Are we facing, we do face skills gaps in those areas that we seem to like really be like, clamoring for, which seems to be the constant thing of like clamoring for this, but we don't have people the skills for that just yet.
Yeah, so here at Andela, being a two-sided marketplace, we ended up getting the perspective of both clients and what they were looking for, and also the talent and what were they upskilling on and getting ready for. The year started with the hype of AI, and we thought that would just overtake everything, and it felt like a year of a bunch of proof of concepts around generative AI. But as the year unfolded, it started to become clear that companies got tired of just proof of concept and wanted to understand, how can this hype actually help me in a business sense? How can I deliver business value with generative AI? And that created a little bit of a separation between those talents that were highly specializing in helping companies building the models, doing like the more heavy science of AI, and the talent that were getting ready to be users of that new tooling to deliver business value more quickly to clients, which could be either in they're just more productive because they are using generative AI to write code and just be faster at it, or they're leveraging large language models in business workflows focused on delivering value to those clients. And as mentioned earlier, even as agentic frameworks and workflows started to come up during the year, that happened around summer, we've seen a lot of requests from our clients around, how can I be using that to solve for a business workflow that I have and reduce the friction in the process?
Awesome. I appreciate your insights on that. Bryan, did we see anything develop when it comes to AI that was, really predicted and expected, or again, were there surprises with AI? Just trying to get a good sense of the roadmap that we're kind of like talked about, and then what actually happened.
Yeah, and I'll kind of build on a little bit of what Bogdan and Alvaro said. Something that I personally predicted and is, kind of this, let's say, a slowdown into AI going into production. There was this belief going into the year that 2023 was the year of POCs and 2024 was going to be the year of production. And, I think what a lot of companies are learning is that, AI is not this panacea for automation, right? It goes back to fundamental problems. If you have siloed data, low data quality, poor data governance, just lack of overall good hygiene on your data, the AI is not going to fix anything. I think the other key thing people are learning is that these generalist models, as impressive as they are with a POC, I love using ChatGPT and things like that for open-ended problems. They're not a lot, they don't know anything about your enterprise. So you have to sort of onboard them just like you would onboard an associate. You have to train them, tune them, get them aligned to your enterprise. And then the third thing that kind of came into play with getting this stuff into production was just the governance and security around it. Like unleashing this powerful technology has to be done in a very thoughtful way. And you really can't, front run all of the governance by just shoving the tech out there. So I think, we kind of predicted that because our goal was always kind of data development, data first. And I've been working in the space for a long time, but I think a lot of people were kind of surprised that AI didn't just, magically, fix a lot of these legacy problems that they had.
Awesome. Thank you much for that. Rocky, did we see any surprises in cybersecurity in 2024, compared with like the predictions, were there new types of threats, new types of technologies that came into play, anything like that?
We certainly did. I mean, we made essentially one really big bet, which was that 2024 would be the year that mobile security, moved out of the realm of an ignored reality, which it was previously in. I think previously people thought mobile devices were safe out of the box. Apple and Google did a good job locking them down. It was something that, frankly, people could just not think about in the enterprise. And what we've seen over the last couple of years is mercenary spyware groups like NSO Group have taken millions of dollars in investment from venture capital and really lowered the barriers to entry to infecting phones. And then we see APT groups around the world, essentially stealing and repurposing that technology. So now mobile malware is actually quite prevalent. In fact, we did a study earlier this year that suggested that for every about 1,000 phones that we've scanned, we've had 2.5 spyware infections, which is just way higher than anyone would have thought. And even if you give that number a big haircut, 95% lower than that, it's still a really high prevalence. And then you pair this with criminal groups like Scattered Spider, for example, who steal credentials and use that to log in and move laterally and implant ransomware. That can inflict many millions of dollars worth of damage on enterprises. So we did actually see people start to take this problem seriously this year.
Gotcha. Thanks for that. Continuing on the cybersecurity theme, Dave, were there any things that were kind of expected in 2024 on the regulatory side in terms of how regulators wanted to see the cybersecurity, and even even the data privacy space, kind of like shored up a bit more? Did any of the things that we maybe talked about at the beginning of the year really kind of come to pass, or were there other things going on that cybersecurity was dealing with and regulators were dealing with that just kind of like kept things from actually taking form?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll speak mostly in the context of the U.S. market. My grand prediction for 2024 is absolutely nothing would happen on that front, and I'm unfortunately here to report that I was completely 100% correct, and so you're welcome. And I view that as a bit of a challenge, right? So Rocky offered some interesting observations around threat activity starting in the mobile domain. We could talk about threat activity and the utilization of Gen AI to up-level social engineering attacks, therefore making it easier for broader groups of attackers to launch credible operations against, text, email, whatever. Potentially even the use, I think we even had one trying to impersonate me to one of my employees into a voicemail, which, so it's the attacks per capita. Like if we look across my customer base, for example, Expel's customer base, and look at kind of the average number of issues that customers are dealing with, it's on the rise. That's not surprising, but because there's no forcing function that's effectively coming from the regulation, the policymaking community, that means that each organization's kind of on its own to get religion, which means there's a high variance of security competence and maturity. And while I would say the arc over time is generally positive, the improvements are incremental, and yet the threat landscape is evolving in a far more rapid rate than incremental. And so most organizations are getting religion when they get punched in the face. And if you think about problems like supply chain attacks, like think about any organization, it's not just their security, but there's a long supply chain that impacts how that business works. And down that tail of the supply chain especially, there is a ton of opportunity for attack and not a lot of pressure to drive improvement. And so I think what that means is for this next year, I predict also no change in the regulatory environment, at least in the US, and two, up and to the right with attack volume and attack success volume.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely had a feeling that nothing was going to happen. And wow, you're.
I'm amazing. Yeah.
You're amazing.
For tomorrow's horse races, it'll be
awesome. Great. Awesome. All right, John. How did productivity really measure up in terms of expectations? From the start of the year. Technology, of course, is supposed to be the thing that helps us, be more efficient and drive things, and everyone's supposed to, technology leads more productivity, lifting our boats. But did we see new efficiencies and shortened time to delivery and time for technology in 2024?
Yeah, I think it echoes back to some of what the previous speakers have already said. My lens particularly is more around that productivity aspect. Obviously, there's crazy cool things that are happening out there, but at AvePoint, we're mostly focused on security, governance, and resilience for digital workplace. So systems like Microsoft, Google, Salesforce, the places people sort of live every day. And I guess it's whatever the opposite of death by 1,000 cuts is. Maybe it's success through 1,000 gains, right? That's the idea of what Gen AI would bring into the everyday workforce for normal people. So there were big expectations. I think on the whole, we saw greater than expected returns, but only when organizations did exactly what Bryan was saying and taking a real sure look at their data quality, at their data security, and their data governance. If you think about it, one of the things we all have come to recognize about AI initiatives, especially Gen AI initiatives, is that it's the data that is most important. Well, if you take that concept and you point it towards what has normally been in most organizations, the most unreliable data, right? The most ungroomed data, the most unsecured data, which is that pile of stuff you carry with you every time you migrate to an updated version of a system, or, once you're in a system like a cloud system, whether it's Google or Microsoft, there's no migration after that, right? So stuff just builds up over time. So what we did see, and we did a study, AvePoint did a study, an AI information management report. And what we saw was that organizations that took this seriously, they did about 1.5 times more likely to realize benefits. But 44% of organizations that responded to our survey said identified that they lack these things. And over half said that they encountered these kind of AI quality, data quality challenges with AI. So I think the message loud and clear is that, number one, there is an opportunity for that success by 1,000 improvements and efficiencies, but it can't be done outside of real initiatives around doing what we knew we had to do all along, right? Take care of the security, the exposure, and the quality of data. I'll also say that one of the things that we saw was, while we saw personal productivity increase, there's no doubt, right? Couple of hours a week saved. If you ask a typical organization that onboards a tool like Gemini or Copilot, you would think for the organization as a whole, wow, we saved every employee 2 to 4 hours this month. That completely justifies the ROI of the investment. Except what we're seeing is a difficulty in organizations drawing a parallel between the increase in personal productivity and the payoff at the organizational level. So that's one thing that we're really trying to help customers understand with things like, what does good actually look like? The problem is the technology is so new that very few organizations have that mindset right now. So we've done things like build in benchmarking into some of our ROI and adoption reporting, so that even if they don't know where the lighthouse is, they can at least start to see how close to the shore they are. And we build from there. So I think that's the biggest takeaway from productivity. Number one, you've got to do your homework and you got to do your prerequisites. Number two, yes, personal productivity, but we've got to find a way to tie in a real trackable way personal productivity to organizational productivity if we want to see those broad org-wide rollouts.
Awesome, great. Thank you very much for that. And each of you, thank you for your individual thoughts on those questions. All right, so this is a question for all of you, and it's kind of, pulling this one from off the cuff. For 2024, were there any predictions that really held water for your organizations in terms of, like, you started the year, you looked at what was being, the proverbial writing on the wall that was being presented, just kind of being put out there in the world, regardless of what sector or specific industry it was, but you saw that and you said, okay, that's something we need to pay attention to. Did any of those things kind of really, result, maybe not something that suddenly, had an immediate impact on, like, revenue or income, though that's also nice. But was there anything that you said, okay, yeah, that, we paid attention to that actually delivered in ways that we're expecting? Or counter to that, were there things that you saw that really didn't, shape up or matter, end up being something that mattered much to what you're doing, and maybe it was something that you maybe you had a sense that maybe that's not something that you needed to particularly chase?
One thing that I thought was prevalent at the beginning of the year, at the end of last year, was, AI is going to take everybody's job. And I think, we'll see if that specter rises again. But I think what we've seen over the course of the year, and maybe it's a more realistic identification as more and more people got exposed to what this Gen AI can actually do, I think those fears were a little bit dispelled. So that was a sort of a prediction or a fear that I thought, and I'm curious my co-panel members here if they've seen the same thing. But I kind of feel like that's now in the background a little bit. So that's just what we saw from our perspective.
Yeah, I can just add to that. I've, in my experience, I actually, though I agree that I was actually quite curmudgeonly coming into the year on AI. I took the opposite perspective. I was like, this talk is all overblown. It's not it's not even going to be that helpful. And I am eating my words to some degree. Like, in my world in particular, there are technical barriers to doing threat hunting on, in particular, mobile devices, but even in a desktop. Sometimes you need to know Python, sometimes you need to know SQL or some sort of scripting language. And the overlap of security knowledge and programming language is not as high as it should be. And AI has been one of those areas where, I should say, threat hunting in particular, and in the SOC in particular, has been one area where AI has been super helpful, actually, like almost revolutionary. So I take my curmudgeonliness back.
Rocky, I think that lines up. I did not coin this phrase at all. I've heard it a billion times in a bunch of places. It's not that AI will take your job. It's that someone that understands AI will take your job.
Boom.
Because they will be able to massively increase their own productivity. The other thing that I've seen is the people most successful in producing that outcome, meaning, or maybe I should say the person that knows AI will transform your job. And the people that are most successful at that are not the people sitting around saying, train me on AI. It's the people that are curious and getting their hands around the technology and attempting to apply it to their problem. And so that's where I tend to see the most kind of near-term innovation is at that individual level. And those engineers are curious by nature and finding ways to make themselves scale. And that's where I think the real win is.
Yeah, on our side, we certainly have not seen the job demand lower. We've seen other industries start to have more jobs and Gen AI becoming a part of the requirement. Now it's no longer I need a Python backend engineer. It's I need a Python backend engineer that knows how to apply AI in one way, shape, or form. And we've seen an increase of that across other sectors. Then tech. Tech certainly, it was all over the media. There were many layoffs, but other sectors, I think, picked up the slack of the layoffs and ended up having a surplus of jobs available.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And another thing that we kind of predicted for this year that we've seen play out and think will continue into 2025 is AI evaluation. There's a lot of rush to do, POCs, get things into production. And I think people kind of had to start taking a step back and say, well, how do we know if this is working or not? How do we, so, you've probably seen the term like vibe check where, people are kind of saying like, okay, this AI feels useful, feels pretty accurate. But I think more rigorous measurement around how you actually evaluate that and monitor that will continue to be a focus.
I also can add, for example, the rapid evolution of multimodal AI systems that will give you, let's just say, help and on leading on areas, leading breakthrough actually in areas like real-time translation or any kind of enterprise productivity tools. So it's much easier now to have visual, auditory, and textual capabilities in any kind of system. This is something that was unexpected for this year, especially with these new kind of models. Yeah.
Gotcha. And just to kind of throw my own little bit in, I mean, there's no secret that folks on the content creation side, whether it be specifically news, entertainment, what have you, the idea of AI, particularly generative AI, being in the mix, has it has caused a few kerfuffles, and I have definitely personally have said a few things of myself, my perspective on that. But I think there's also been a gradual understanding of, I guess, how AI can and how it might not be that effective in terms of actually developing and generating and producing things. There is that immediate, it's going to just wipe out the need for writers, creators, singers, artists, what have you. But then the reality of the rubber meeting the road, where the results of what was possible, what at least at this time, for what has been 2024, what is developed and what has been able to actually be produced versus what was, I guess, the extent of what was sought and wanted. Some of the AI hallucination in terms of written content, creating things that just weren't there. Certain instances where even like certain attorneys used generative AI in ways that they shouldn't have, where it was like hallucinating and creating case precedent that did not exist. And even on the artistic side, the random instances of artists saying like that the AI artists being frustrated that others were making money off of their AI art, and originating artists kind of looking and saying, really? You're mad about that. So I think that aspect of AI eating the lunch of creatives and those who are creators of things, it still going through growing pains, but I think there's a different understanding that is coming to play there. Okay. So and then this is kind of like the question we were all kind of pushing back on, and we'll keep it short and sweet if anyone has any thoughts on this. Quantum computing is one of those things that has, of course, been in the background for a while, and it's going to probably continue to be in the background for its development. So did any of you see any predictions or talk about what was potentially going to be happening with quantum computing? Of course, taking with a grain of salt that, this is something that's still in development, did anything start to prove relevant in terms of like maybe the pace of what has been happening, or how things are going with that really seemed to really kind of capture attention? I bring up quantum computing because there was a time where that was the hot spotlight technology that we're all talking about. Quantum computing is going to do all the things. It's going to be like magic in a bottle. And then AI showed up and goes, hi, I'm cute. So was there anything that anybody heard? And if there was, and you know what, if there was nothing at all, that's fine too. Just want to see, really what was relevant in terms of what was heard in terms of predictions on that.
I am by no means an expert on quantum computing, and that'll show in my answer. But I mean, for me, the thing that at least came true was that I still don't understand it or see a use case. I mean, I keep seeing the advancements. I saw, the new hardware advancements and things like that. But until I see a practical application and something I can do with it, I continue to kind of think of it as one of those things that's in the future.
I have this new quantum AI startup if you guys want to get in on it. Early seed round. Yeah.
Is it based on QR codes and daily deals too?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and we're gonna send these quantum Q cats to everybody, and you can totally, well, yeah. So no, obviously no, and this actually ties into even if I was seeing those use cases, just like we saw Gen AI pop up. Lots of people ask cyber questions and they're like, oh, how do you think about AI and cyber? And they're going to ask, how do you think about quantum and cyber? I'm like, you can't patch your systems or keep your password in your pocket. And you think I care about AI and quantum? Like, attackers are a business and they're going to use exactly as much energy as they need to steal your stuff. And so before you worry about all that in the context of cyber, could you please just deal with hygiene and the basics and invest in an effective program and inspect it like the rest of your business? I'm sorry, I got on my soapbox there. So I haven't seen any enterprise interest. And even if I did, I would probably be lecturing them to say, can we keep our eye on the ball with what you're already operating today?
I mean, not for nothing, we're supposed to have flying cars for everyone at this point. Gotcha.
I don't know. I'm a big quantum computing fan. I don't know. I'm just trying to be contrary here to be interesting. That's all.
Yeah. No, this is not the, I'm not trying to actually denounce it. It's just kind of the idea of like how grounded we are in terms of what's being said. I mean, I've definitely actually had, I think I saw my IBM folks a few weeks ago talking about, how things were progressing with their efforts. And, I understand that and I hear that, but also they like, okay, well, are we getting there yet? So.
Yeah. I think it's still in the lab, right? It's one of those things that's still in the lab. When it comes out, we're all going to go, wow, that's genius. But for most of us, as Dave said, there's way more practical considerations that we should be looking at.
I think, John, I think you're right. Like, well, I mean, we could go back and look at Gen AI, which didn't matter at all until you could manifest it in the context of a chat bot where it could really be in the zeitgeist and all of a sudden everybody got it. So it would be interesting. Like if that happens for quantum, then I think we'll be sitting here having an entirely different discussion. But the use case argument, which Bryan, you mentioned, I think is spot on. And a use case argument where people broadly can understand it could cause a lot of acceleration in how people think about the technology. But until that happens, it's going to be just the hardcore PhDs that are trying to figure it out.
That's a good comparison because I mean, LLMs and AI existed before ChatGPT, but that was the UX or the use case that caused it to hit the zeitgeist. And I think that just hasn't happened for quantum yet. But when it does, it'll happen all at once, probably, just like AI did the last 2 years.
All right. Last question, then we can wrap up. Is it better for organizations to maybe not, urgently chase predictions at the beginning of the year when you hear something's going to be the thing, to not chase a thing? Or does that mean that there's a potential that you're kind of giving up what might be a competitive edge if you just decide like, well, I'm just going to ignore what's being said out there, and stop reading the tea leaves and just, stick with what I know that what works and cross my fingers that I won't be surprised by something that actually develops?
I almost think the answer is yes and no. And that is, we saw this obviously as a software company, the first that when's your AI product coming out? Like wait a minute, what is an AI product, by the way, right? AI can assist a product, AI can make a product better, but what is an AI product? It is possible to get so obsessed by these trends that you chase them at the expense of, as Dave said, all of the practical things that are going to, keep you eating this year. So I think that's the wrong approach. But I think, it's not a binary thing here. You have to have part or people within your organization who are horizon scanning, who are out there looking for what's new, and they have to be looking into it. Otherwise, you are going to have to wait until other people have figured it out, given you a model. So I think the right approach is to sort of compartmentalize and say, hey, wait, how are we making sure that we are being observant of this and bringing it into the business in a way that's measured and makes sense without going so overboard that we're chasing every trend down the street.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Prior to joining a startup, I worked at a large bank, and there was a need to do experiments and things like that, but they really had to be aligned with your business goals. If you couldn't really say how that could potentially make money and support the business, experimenting with something just for the sake of doing it, I think would be a waste of resources. And at least in a place that's like a large enterprise like that, the other issue I saw was just seeing the experiments spread too thin. So, you got 10 different groups doing the same experiment on the same model. And the organizations that get this right tend to have a little more like top-down direction on that, so that all the resources are allocated into the right thing that matters, instead of, letting it sort of organically spread across a bunch of things that compete for the same resources.
On our side, what we've seen is helping prepare talent to understand the fundamentals and be able to guide the customers that they're working with on understanding, should I be diving deep into this or not? Such a thing happened in the blockchain days, right? There was a moment where everything was about blockchain and had to be in the blockchain, and it's no longer the case. AI does come across as more of a fundamental building block, though, because it can impact even how you do your normal business development or creation. So we're certainly helping our talent community and guiding them. And there's a lot of, they're asking us for support on how to get better and learn more to be able to help their clients. So we try to strike a good balance of being on the hype train to some extent, to be able to guide, should we go at it or not?
Great. Any other thoughts on that final question from anyone else? No? Gotcha. Great. All right. Well, here's to looking towards 2025, which I'm sure will be the year that 3D television finally takes off. Dave, Bogdan, Bryan, Rocky, John, Alvaro, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on the show today. I appreciate all your insight on looking back on 2024 and giving us some grounded sense of the year ahead. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, Happy New Year, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Good New Year.
To listen to the entire conversation, look for the DOS1 Hunt podcast on Spreaker, Spotify, Amazon Music, and other popular podcast platforms.